Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a totally fascinating dialectic from the essay, The Deathless Was Never a Drought. We're going to unpack a really compelling argument about the origins of religion, the ultimate limits of altered states, and ask a pretty massive question. Is enlightenment literally just a biological state that we can somehow hack?
Look, we live in an era completely obsessed with quick fixes, right? Peptide cocktails of dubious origins are everywhere, and tech startups are constantly promising to optimize our inner lives. Need to clear some deep therapy-resistant trauma? Take a trip. Want to live forever? Just inject yourself with some young blood. The underlying assumption in all of this, the whole shebang, is that whatever the problem is, there simply must be a hack to run. Some magical piece of tech or chemistry that lets us completely bypass the sheer, grinding effort of real, lasting transformation.
And this quote brilliantly illustrates our starting point. It's this persistent fallacy of modernity. The idea that if we can just uncover the right neurobiological shortcut, we can skip the hard work altogether. And it's a fallacy that extends all the way up to serious-minded folks who are actively working toward creating an enlightenment pill. But as we're about to see, confusing a temporary state for the ultimate destination is a trap humans have literally been falling into for thousands of years.
Section 1. The entheogen hypothesis. Did psychedelics start religion?
So what's wild here is that when you look at modern scholarship, you see this map of chemical origins drawn out for almost all of the major Western traditions. You've got Wasson and Ruck looking at the Eleusinian mysteries in Greece, Allegro investigating early Christianity, and Albert Hofmann supplying the underlying chemistry. But notice that final point. In all this massive literature, history's absolute greatest consciousness explorer is completely left out: the Buddha. Why is Buddhism practically a ghost in this whole lineage of psychedelic scholarship?
Section 2. Examining the historical evidence. The missing link. If we play detective and look at ancient texts, there's a massive contrast. Take the Hindu tradition. It is completely open. The Rig Veda literally dedicates its entire 9th book to soma, explicitly stating, "We have drunk the soma. We have become immortal." No secrets, no codes. But when modern scholars try to find psychedelics in later Buddhist traditions, they have to rely on decoding what's known as twilight language. They argue that symbols like parasols or sweating deities are secretly codes for hallucinogenic mushrooms. The problem? The actual ancient commentators of these texts never, ever read them pharmacologically. They read them yogically, purely as symbols of meditative bliss.
Now, this is where words get super tricky. The word Amrita, which means the deathless, is this pan-Indian religious term. And yeah, it sits right next to soma in the Vedas. And it definitely shows up in Buddhism as amata. But here's the crucial point. Just because a word traveled doesn't mean a psychoactive substance traveled inside it. The Buddha actually pulled off this massive semantic expropriation. He took a word that used to mean a magical, physical nectar you literally drink to reach heaven, and he totally emptied it of its chemical meaning. He repurposed it to mean the extinction of craving. It was a complete paradigm shift.
But wait, you're probably thinking, didn't all these ideas and, drugs just travel along the Silk Road anyway? It's a totally fair question. By 500 BCE, we've got hard physical evidence of potent cannabis being burned in funerary braziers in the Pamirs. Around 300 BCE, the Greek philosopher Pyrrho is traveling with Alexander the Great and actually hanging out with early Buddhist teachers. And by 100 CE, there's this massive high-volume traffic of art, philosophy, and kingship moving fluidly between the Greek world and the Buddhist world.
Well, that massive traffic actually blows up the psychedelic argument. Think about it. Buddhism sat right astride the most cosmopolitan exchange network on Earth. It had maximal contact with Scythian cannabis rituals and Greek pharmacology. And yet, the one thing it explicitly codified in response was the 5th precept against intoxicants. Why? Because the very core of the Buddhist method is the systematic, rigorous training of attention, and intoxicants completely scramble that. Buddhism wasn't a smuggler of these substances, for sure. It was a filter, and it was just doing its job.
Section 3. The plot twist. The Buddha's journey. Okay, let's look at the core texts, where we discover that the real story isn't actually about drugs at all. Before his awakening, the Buddha studied under the greatest meditation masters of his era. First, he mastered the absolute highest, most refined, formless meditative attainments possible. And to be clear, these weren't drug trips. They were the most sober, disciplined, altered states a human could possibly produce. But the plot twist is what he did next. He rejected them. He walked away. He realized that mistaking any state, no matter how ridiculously blissful or sublime, for the final destination is the ultimate trap. A state is just a state. It's not actual liberation.
There's actually a foundational concept for this across contemplative traditions. In Zen, they call it makyo. Whether you induce it chemically or meditatively, you might experience these incredible bursts of luminous light, raptures, or totally wild cosmic visions. But practitioners are explicitly warned that this is just the scenery along the road. It's not the arrival. The real trap is getting bogged down and attached to the spectacular, shiny byproducts of your own mind.
Section 4. The tech-assisted meditation trap.
Fast forward to today, and we're seeing this play out all over again with the modern jhana hack. We've got tech startups running expensive retreats, strapping electrodes to people's heads, and promising joy on tap. And sure, they're using drug-free techniques, but they are treating a profound meditative way station as a terminal consumer product. It's all about measuring brainwaves to optimize and press this private bliss button. It's honestly as if enlightenment is just another app to download, completely decoupling the altered state from any real penetrative insight.
So it all comes down to the frame you bring to your practice. On one hand, we have the acquisitive frame. Hey, I attained this state. I pressed the bliss button. It's entirely about optimizing metrics and hoarding private bliss. But you know what happens? The second you get up from the meditation cushion, entropy resumes, and the bliss completely fades. On the other hand, the insight frame treats that state as a steady, quiet platform for the actual labor of liberation. The quieting of the mind is really only useful because it finally lets the looking happen. This quote really hits the nail on the head. The ancient masters weren't just being Puritans warning against drugs. The warning was fundamentally about your relationship to whatever state of mind you achieve. Pure access to a meditative state, if you couple it with the wrong acquisitive relationship, yields the exact same dead end as taking a psychedelic shortcut. If you make this state the goal, you miss the entire point.
Section 5. The true nature of awakening. Okay, so if awakening isn't just some private neurobiological state you can hack and keep all to yourself, then what exactly is it? Well, the Lotus Sutra reveals this beautiful paradigm-shifting concept called the single vehicle. It essentially says that every single practitioner is ultimately a bodhisattva, a being entirely dedicated to the awakening of all. It proposes that awakening is absolutely not an interior state privately held inside your skull. It is fundamentally relational. It's enacted in the web of connections between us.
The tradition actually sums this up with a beautifully profound phrase, Yui Butsu Yo Butsu, which loosely translates to a Buddha and a Buddha. Think about the grammar of that phrase. It completely refuses the solitary. It implies that true understanding is fathomed in the and, in the messy, beautiful space between us. A self-arising, totally isolated awakening is just impossible because we don't exist in isolation. Our own awakening happens only in relation to the awakening of others.
So we're going to leave you with this final, provocative thought.
The whole pursuit of a life hack, a magic drug, or some tech-assisted neuro-retreat is usually just a solitary self trying to frantically secure its own private prize. But if the bliss button is a dead end, and if awakening is never something you can just hold on to alone, are you ready to open your hand to the other? Because as it turns out, the open hand was never closed around a private prize to begin with. It was open toward each other all along. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time.